the program I was listening to was I think it was the Catholic radio my wife listens to, and they were advertising about a cemetery up about 6 miles from my house that was honoring war dogs, military working dogs. So I went to that event, figuring maybe there'd be 50 or 60 people there. And there were probably close to 200 people there. And Phil was there. He was the person that kind of got this thing started.
He's the founder.
He's the founder. And it's just an amazing story. So I would like to introduce Phil from Milford. And he will entertain us. He did have a DVD, but we can't seem to get that working, but I'm sure you guys will have a few questions for him, and he's an amazing speaker. So give a warm welcome to Phil from Milford.
Yes, sir.
Well, good afternoon. Again, my name is Phil Weitlauf. I'm a U.S. Army veteran serving in the early 60s, actually prior to Vietnam. My partner here is Ken Reynolds. He's a U.S. Army retired. And as we start talking about the Michigan War Dog Memorial, you'll find several of our board members are military veterans. So anyways, to give you an idea how we got started on this, I'm going to take you back to the first day in 2010 when I was told about a war dog monument at the corner of 11 Mile and Milford Road. So I thought, well, you know, I'm kind of into the dogs. I'm a dog lover. I have 2 German Shepherds. I thought I'd go take a check at it. So I loaded up one of my dogs and we went for a ride. And we got to the corner of 11 Mile and Milford Road. All it was a wooded area. Couldn't see anything. So we parked the car, took a walk. As we got about 75 yards in, there it was. Huge granite monument with the words on it, War Dog. It was totally covered with vines and weeds and brush. As we looked around, I started seeing headstones here and there around. We walked further into the area and more headstones showed up. So I said, wow, number one, this is a disaster. That somebody would let this go, regardless whether it's a pet cemetery or a military, honoring military dogs. It's a shame that it would let go like this. So I took that information I had in my mind to my AMVETS meeting in Milford, and I brought it to the attention of the membership and asked that we form a detail to start cleaning this up. So most of the guys raised their hands and said, yep, we'll do what we can to help you. What do we got to do? And I said, well, you know, we need chainsaws, weed whackers, wheelbarrows, any type of equipment you can think of. Because it is a mess. I took one step further and I got a hold of all the VSOs in the area, sent them out a message. I sent out a message to the dog club people. And I sent out a message in the newspaper to the local residents. And on August, I think it was 11th, in 2010, was our first cleanup day on a Saturday. I was totally surprised. We had over 50 people show up. The street, or the road was just lined with cars. And we started working on it. And we just took a section at a time, and kept working on it. Until by the middle of 2011, we pretty much cleared the majority of the heavy brush, so at least you could walk around and maneuver a little bit. At that time, we kept this program going, asking people to come and volunteer their time on Saturday for the cleanup. And again, there wasn't a time that went by that I didn't have 40 to 50 people show up. Matter of fact, one of our members of the AMVETS happens to be an Oakland County judge. Judge Powers said to me, he says, Phil, he said, what you're doing out there would lend itself to community service. So the next time you have a cleanup, call Officer Bill. He said he'll give you as many kids you want. So I did. Called him up. Sure enough. He said, how many kids you want? I said, I need about 15. That's cleanup day. These kids showed up. Now, most of these kids have just did things that you and I have done, never got caught at. Did DUIs and things like that. And I was amazed. Those kids really worked their fannies off. When they seen what we was doing, they got right into it. So that was very enlightening to see that. So anyways, we continued with the workup and the cleaning and going on. Well, finally we had it in a position where we decided, we'll back up. Right prior to that, my buddy Ken Reynolds got involved. He seen what we was doing. He said, I think I can get my teeth into something like this. He said, I can help you out. So on November 11th, we did a dedication day. We dedicated, basically rededicated the site as we cleaned it. Right after that dedication, which we had about 150 people show up to that, Ken decided that we need to have something happen every single year, like a dedication. He took one step further and he wrote up a proclamation and he submitted it to the governor, Governor Snyder, making March 13th K-9 Veteran Day in the state of Michigan. When he told me what he had done, I just smiled. I said, well, we might hear something in the next couple of years. Within 6 weeks, Governor Snyder signed it. And a copy of that proclamation is backed around the desk. So each year, March 13th, we celebrate K-9 Veteran Day. And a lot of that is thanks to Ken Reynolds for stepping up and moving forward. Which I like to say that stepping up because I've belonged to a couple organizations and it always amazes me, there's certain members that always want to step up and do things. And of course, a lot of members like to just ride along. But I'm really thankful that Ken came along with our group because he's not afraid to step up. Sometimes I have to tell him to calm down. So anyways, it went along great. So we continued working on it this way. Then we decided we're getting to the point and getting a lot of visibility, maybe we should form a company. So we did. It is now called the Michigan War Dog Memorial, Inc. And we have a board of directors now. And this week we are filing for a 501c3 rating. And then we will start doing a lot of fundraisers. Also, we will then open it up for corporate sponsors. Right now I have one corporate sponsor who's very interested, is VCA. That's the Animal Hospital in Farmington. The VCA has about 540 animal hospitals all over the United States. And they're going to pick one of our goals and sponsor that funding, so which is a great deal. So that's kind of, that's the Michigan War Dog Memorial, that's the site, and that's what we've been doing. On April 13th, we had our first military dog burial. We cleared an area that was not being used. We set a standard on the size of a monument, and we had our first burial. I think Frank attended that. Yeah. There was about 150 some odd people there. We had about 40 canines there. And we set up a program and a procedure to follow. And it went very well. The dog owner, which is, the dog was a retired military working dog. She brought the ashes in an urn, and we did a nice procession for him, and they had a nice program. So we were very, very excited about it. On May 5th, which is this coming Sunday, we also have our second burial. This is MWD Mina. MWD Mina has quite a record. This dog started with was actually born in the UK and was trained in the UK by the British Army. The dog spent 2 tours in Bosnia with the British Army and then was transferred to the US. And when he got to the Lackland Air Force Base, he was then tattooed and given a serial number to the US Army. And then he was sent to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri as his home base. And from that point on, he spent 9 tours in Afghanistan and brought everyone home safe. He was a mine detection dog. He was well-known, he won competition after competition, never failed. Because if a dog fails, somebody dies. And that dog never failed through his training. He did so well that the military kept him going till he was 12 years old before they retired him. Normally they would retire the dog around 9, maybe 10. But this dog was 12 years old and was still going strong. But this handler had the first dibs at him. The handler adopted him, sent him home to his wife, and 18 months later the dog died, fortunately. So we're going to have a ceremony for this dog on Sunday at the Michigan War Dog Memorial, right there on 11 Mile and Milford Road. So it starts at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The process only takes about 30 minutes, so if anybody's got some free time, it's something to see. We have Patriot Riders there. We usually have about 40 guys in a flag line. We've got a chaplain coming from Troy, Colonel Mindy Albright. We also have the commander of the AMVETS going to be presenting the flag. And we have a VFW member who plays the taps. And then we have the canines. We have 4 canines that will surround the monument, and we'll give a canine salute. These dogs are trained to howl. So it's kind of a touching thing. If you're in the area, please stop in and take a look at that. So, you had a question, you said?
I just wondered, how do dogs avoid stepping on mines
They're taught, they're trained.
so they can smell it from a distance?
Oh, yeah.
And then they just point, so they
They'll
don't,
point.
they don't have to be right on top of it.
No, they just sit down.
They just
When
say,
they, when they come on a scent, they just sit down. And that's what they're trained to do.
What are they sniffing for? Various explosives?
Gunpowder,
Gunpowder.
mainly. And the different chemicals, several different chemicals the dog can smell. A dog can outsmell a human 1,000
Yeah, I know
times.
that.
So they can smell that scent. In fact, one of our people, I think it was Buddy, he come home and he was in the garage and somebody had a case of ammunition in there. And he sat down, he was still working. You know, so he smells whatever's in that, saltpeter is in his ammunition, so.
yes.
Prior to your first burial that you oversaw, when was the last time the dog was buried there?
Probably the interment stopped at the cemetery, I believe it was in the middle 80s. The cemetery was established in 1936. And in 1946 is when the townspeople heard about what the war dogs did to saving lives. They came together with donations, I think it was $3,700 at that time, to have that granite monument set up. At that time they had a big German Shepherd, bronze German Shepherd on top of it. The area was called at that time Happy Hunting Grounds. It was established by a veterinarian in Highland Park, where his clients wanted somewhere to bury their pets and then they passed on. That's how it all got started. In 1947, the first military dog was buried there. His name was Sergeant Sparks. Sergeant Sparks with the Doberman Pinschers, he fought with the Marines in Okinawa, Guadalcanal, and in Guam. And survived all those. Well, that's pretty tough battles. Survived it all. Came home, was only home for a year, and he died. The handler, who was the Marine Corps soldier, wanted to bury him like his buddies had died on the beaches. So he wrapped him in a blanket and buried him in front of the monument. And no headstone, no nothing. Ken was able to find all this information through the archives. So, and then he went another step further. He went into the Maryland archives, the National Archives. And believe it or not, they found Sergeant Sparks' records, his military record and veterinarian records, and they sent the whole jacket to us. Now we had evidence. So we went out on a fundraiser and we got Sergeant Sparks a headstone. And on that headstone, we have a dog chain, dog tag with his serial number, which is 49. Over to the left, we have his unit patch etched into the stone. And we have Sergeant Sparks, you know, U.S. Marine Corps K-9, and fought with the Marines in Guadalcanal and Okinawa. That stone now sits in front of the big monument. That's where he was buried. So that was the first one we know of that was buried there. The second one was Buddy, MWD Buddy. The third one would be MWD Mina.
And if I can interrupt, Phil, what makes Mina unique, or at least I found it to be unique, is the fact that Mina means subterranean in Spanish, and because Mina is a Spanish word, and so I look at her as a Mexican dog.
He,
I'm sorry. I looked at him as a Mexican dog. Well, it so happens we're burying him on the 5th of May, which is Cinco de Mayo. So, I thought that was just ironic that we're doing that. So, and Admiral Byrd has a dog out there too.
yes.
Blizzard.
I know at the ceremony that I attended, you mentioned how many lives that they
Yeah,
we saved, and, you're going to cover that.
Yeah, I wanted to cover the Michigan War Dog Memorial first, and then I'm going to get into the war dogs themselves. I'm going to backtrack a little bit, because I said that interment stopped in the middle 80s is because of the people who started this whole program became at a certain age, they couldn't handle it anymore, and the younger generation wasn't that interested. And that's how nature started taking over this whole site until we came along. I sat down with the township on several occasions and then got their permission to start interment again, but only for retired military working dogs or retired service dogs, which would include police dogs, border patrol dogs, FBI dogs, homeland security dogs, airport security dogs. And then we went a little step further. We said any dog that serves us, which would be the leader blind dogs, therapy dogs, PTSD companion dogs, which is a new breed, a new term coming up, which have been working out very well for these fellows that are suffering from that PTSD. So any dog that serves and protects us will be allowed to be buried there, but no more pets. We don't allow any more pets. And so that, and the township agreed with me and said fine. So, yes.
As you were telling me before the meeting here, dogs serve in all theaters or phases of the war. But my question is, does anyone know what % of the dogs serve in combat? And the real question is, of those that serve in combat or near combat, what % perish?
Okay, I'll get to that.
Yeah,
All right.
we got all those numbers.
I'll just move on into the war dog themselves. Basically, dogs have been fighting along our men and women. Just about every conflict we've been in. It goes way back. But I'm going to start in World War I. In World War I, they were referred to as ambulance dogs. And the dogs were trained. So after a battle between the trenches in no man's land, the dog was trained to go out and find a wounded soldier
Okay.
and bring back a piece of his article, of his clothing, anything he could bring back to the stretcher bearers, and then lead the stretcher bearers back to that wounded soldier. He was trained to bypass any soldier that was already perished. So he would save these wounded soldiers from that area. So that's how he was trained. In World War II, at that time they started calling them war dogs. The first dog platoon was assigned and deployed to Guam in 1943. Prior to those dog platoons coming in, the casualty rate was very extremely high for the Allies. It was jungle warfare. And a lot of the troops had not been that well trained in jungle warfare. And Japanese had a little bit of edge on that. When the dogs arrived, the casualty rating dropped by 70%. And of 550 missions led in Guam, not one was ambushed when led by a war dog. So that was a credit of a war dog. And again, it's a well-trained dog to do a specific thing. And once these dogs understand what you've taught them to do, and once they'll say accept that, they're very good at it. Very good at it. They enjoy working working dog, a German Shepherd, a Doberman Pinscher, they don't like to lay around all the time. They like to work. If you don't give them a job, they'll find a job, and it may be not that desirable to you. So you have to give them something to do. And these dogs do a fantastic job. In Korea, there was only one dog platoon that was deployed to Korea. And then the dog platoon is about 28 dogs. But of those 28 dogs that they mainly used for patrols, not so much the explosives, saved an approximately 3,000 lives. Okay. World War II, I didn't mention that. World War II, they have been credited with saving 15,000 lives. So that's 15,000 men and women that would not come home if it wasn't for a dog. They saved them. They did the same thing in Korea, 3,000. In Vietnam, the main function for these dogs was identifying of the enemy because the jungle was extremely thick. They could spot and smell the enemy long before a human could. They were also trained for booby traps. The stories that you will hear if you talk to a Vietnam dog handler, and you get them talking to you, they'll tell you stories that curl your hair on the back of your neck. But such stories as the dog's walking along and all of a sudden he alerts. And the handler's like looking around, he doesn't see anything. Gives the dog a command to move on. He won't move. Well, you know something's wrong. Well, all of a sudden he looks in front of him, there's a tripwire. The dog hears the wire singing in the breeze where you couldn't hear it. Now if he had alerted and stood fast, the guy walked through, he could have been killed. So those are the stories you'll hear from these guys of what those dogs do. And in Vietnam, they're credited with saving 10,000 lives. So that's a lot of lives so far that we're saving. We're up to 28,000. That's again a credit to the dog. So, and then as we go into the next phase of different conflicts, the Middle East, a little bit of change took place at this point. Instead of calling them war dogs, as we've been referring to them as they are, they become MWDs, military working dogs. And they're trained on several disciplines. The main one is explosives. We all know IEDs kill, maim, and it's a cowardly way to do battle. But the Middle East people do that. How do you combat that? The dog is trained to smell that and alert, and then let explosive teams come and defuse it. The first year, they didn't use a lot of them. There's a lot of IEDs that hurt the people. More and more dogs were sent in, and that IED thing started slowing up. In some cases where they call hotspots, they actually would have two canines leading a convoy down a road on a certain stretch that they considered a hotspot. You definitely would need a platoon or a squad, but they would smell these IEDs, smell the explosives, and they would dig them up. So you're hearing less and less about IEDs because of that. Today in Afghanistan, there's 600 teams, and their main function, again, is explosives. And they basically go out with the troops, but they also protect the perimeters of the bases. Now, your question a minute ago was how many dogs are actually in combat and how many dogs are actually on guard duty. And it's about a 50-50. Air Force mainly was for security, Air Force bases. Those dogs were mainly trained to secure base. Okay? Tracker dogs, bomb sniffing dogs, those type of dogs went out in the field, and they would be on point, which as everybody knows, that's a pretty bad spot to be, but they're always on point, and they would move ahead of the groups. But in casualty rating, surprisingly enough, less than 20%. Less than 20%. I believe in Vietnam, there was a total of 4,000 dogs deployed. And that's over that 10-year period. And so some, was deployed, some went home, some went back, some didn't live. 10 years, it's a long time for that conflict. So some went back. when the time came for the people to pull out of Vietnam, there was about 540 dogs still there. Now, that's the sad part. Because dogs were classified as equipment, and the order was given, when you pulled out of Vietnam, you left your equipment, which many are referring to Jeeps, trucks, and whatever, but it also included the dogs. So 500 some dogs were actually let go to fend for themselves, or some were euthanized, some were given over to the South Vietnamese Army. The handlers of these dogs, which believe me, there's a bond so tight between a handler and his dog, could not believe this is happening. But of those of you in the military, you know, it's not open for debate. Orders given, you follow your orders. So a lot of those dogs did not make it. I did a lot of research on that, and I did find an area, yet to confirm it, that there were several handlers with their officers that were able to go back to Vietnam prior to the fall of Saigon and was able to recover 235 dogs. I don't know if that's true. I'd like to believe it's true. But the other 250 some dogs perished over there for the lives they saved. That's the way they was treated. This made a big stink with a lot of people. And to move time forward, whether you like Bill Clinton or not, he made a law. Never again would a canine be left behind. Never again. It's a law now.
Well, he let a lot of dogs go. He left a lot of dogs behind.
Clinton? I'm not gonna get in the political thing.
Start with Monica.
No, but that will not happen. Right now, when the veterinary corps declares a dog to be retired, then the dog is put up for adoption. The current handler has first dibs. If he wants to take the dog home, he gets the first crack. If not, it goes into the pool for adoption. And they keep them at